Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Jonathan Pacheco. I serve as VP of Policy and Programs at Casita Coalition, and I'm thrilled to kick off our latest webinar, Selecting and Working with ADU Professionals, the September edition of Casita Coalition's 2025 webinar series. We'd like to give a big thank you to Arnold Ventures and Wells Fargo for their sponsorship of our webinar series. And for those of you who are new to us, Casita Coalition is a 501c3 nonprofit focused on building stronger and more resilient neighborhoods by championing diverse, accessible housing options. We bring together a powerful network of homeowners, practitioners, builders, policymakers, planners, architects from across the country to remove and unlock barriers so we have the full potential for middle housing. Next slide. Through bold narrative change, systems reform, technical assistance, capacity building, and smart policy, we are pushing the housing conversation forward and getting results. So a little housekeeping for our webinar today. You'll find bios for today's speakers, who you see on the screen, posted in the chat as they come on screen. To keep things running smoothly, we ask that you please drop in your questions in the Q&A box. Not the chat box. Drop in your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll tackle them during the audience Q&A segment at the end. Next slide. Today's session centers on best practices for ADU development. You're going to see, and we're going to cover all this today that you see on your screen here. We're going to be going through all of this and more. You're going to hear from Timothy Pawlak, our Director of Education at Casita Coalition, as well as Katherine Peoples, our Board Chair of Casita Coalition and CEO of HPP Cares. Next slide. Timothy and Katherine both have extensive experience in helping homeowners and individuals learn everything that one needs to know about building an ADU. So if you think of the ADU process, what you see here right now on your screen, all that entails, Timothy and Katherine are the people to get to know so you can understand how this process works and who are the best people to work with in the process. So with that, I'm going to get us started. Next slide. Before you start the process of building an ADU, you want to be prepared. This process can take months, if not longer. You need plans, permits, and you got to get into a construction phase. Permits have windows of time for review. And if the plans aren't drawn correctly, that could result in corrections from your city or your county. And now the process is taking longer, right? Once you get permits, you move to construction. And this involves a lot of moving parts. You need to pass inspections and ultimately get a certificate of compliance. All of this has costs in terms of time and money. One of the best things you can do is prepare ahead. So we want you, as you start to think about this process and getting into it, write down your vision. What do you want to see when you're done with the process? Establish a budget. How much will all of this cost? Working with all the folks you see on screen here, right? Figuring out, how do we get this done? Research financing. Are you going to pay out of pocket, or are you going to get loans to finance the project? And think about also what resources do you need after the ADU is built? For example, if you want to rent out the ADU, you might need to check out resources on being a landlord. There's a lot that's involved in this process, and it starts with finding the right people, the key professionals to work with. You want to find ADU professionals that you can trust, licensed contractors and builders, professional designers and engineers, and not just people, who do good work, but people in the ADU world who can show you the good work that they've gotten built. So where does this all begin? How do I start? Casita Coalition is here to help. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Timothy to get us started. Timothy?
Great, thanks, Jonathan. Hey, leave that slide up there because that's a really important slide that we need to look at. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for that introduction. So as you see in this list, there are key professionals. Now, it's not important that you memorize these key professionals, but be aware that you're going to be encountering them and having conversations potentially with them. So we know city officials and county officials are involved in the process. That includes the permitting process, zoning that you may need, the planning department. You may have a designer or architect that's involved, a drafts person that's skilled. And one of the things you want to make sure is that they have experience in the ADU world, because the ADU regulations are distinctly different than building other types of housing. You'll have engineers, licensed or contractors, electricians, HVAC technicians involved. The idea is that you want to confirm that they're all licensed and that you want to make sure they have the experience to work on that. Often, these other professionals, uh, electricians, technicians, framers, they are governed or they are work closely with the general contractor. So that is very important in terms of understanding how there are teams of people that work together, not only on the site or through the process of design. For instance, designers and architects will work closely with contractors to make sure the structural is done correctly, but also the architect and designers are going to work with the city as they go through plan check to check those structural calculations, the energy calculations. Those are what are required and needed by building code. So although it's a complex process, it's often coordinated by these individuals that lead the process. So in design, it's a designer architect that leads that group of individuals and then communicates with the city and the permitting officials, the zoning department, the planning department. And it's also the contractor that coordinates those electricians, the framers, all the trades that are involved in putting that ADU together. Next slide, please. When you're seeking a professional, you need to do a little due diligence. And one part of that is verifying licenses. On the screen, you'll see a couple of links that will lead you to the boards and the regulatory processes that license contractors. So you can do that. You can ask these groups, the Contractor License, State License Board and the California Architecture Board, about the professional. You can find out about their past violations, if any. You can see their contract license, if it's valid and up to date. A lot of that information is available to you, and it's one of those steps that you can take or request from the professional. Say, hey, I'd like to get your license number. I'd like to know more about any violations you've had. So those are questions typically you want to ask and not be afraid to ask. The contractor should be very forthright and the designer should be very upfront about the information they're sharing, and then this is a way to verify that information. So on the websites, you'll see a lot of information. There's a lot of marketing, a lot of sales. It does not replace the need to verify that professional. And checking bonds and insurance status is very important. And again, if you don't know how to do that, or you feel a little intimidated by that process of seeking that information out, just ask the professional. They should have that information on hand, be able to give it to you in writing, and it will really help you have confidence as you move forward. Next slide, please. This is an example of where you might do a license search. So at the California Architecture Board, if you get the license number of that architect, you can submit it here and be able to review that and take a look at what the status of that designer. Next slide. This is an example of the Contractors State Licensing Board. So this is the website. These are the two links and that you can look at. So when you are doing your research and doing your confidence building in the process, then you want to use these resources. Let's go to the next slide so we can just talk a little bit about comparing bids or how you might approach a bid process. I do want to highlight that as a director of the Casita Coalition Academy, we cover all these topics inside of the Academy courses that are offered. So if this is something that really is something you want to dig into deeper, there's an opportunity through the Casita Academy to learn more about these things. Comparing bids is a big task. And if you're new to the process and you start thinking about how am I going to be able to understand one bid versus another, this is an example. So This example provided is one format bids come in. And I want to highlight that this is not the only way that bids are produced or that they're presented to you. So think about the information that you're seeing and then compare that information versus being able to line two identical documents side by side and compare those. Typically, you only want to compare bids after the plans are completed. And it's not necessarily the final stamp, but it will give you confidence that when the city permits that with its final approval, you know that document as a whole, those plan set have been approved by the city, and that is a plan set that the contractor will use to start to use as to determine materials, processes, and the costs. Make sure that you understand all the timelines involved. Look at how long it will take, the scope of work, materials that are used. Those will be defined in this. A lot of times I hear scenarios where someone said, hey, a contractor gave me a number on a napkin and said they can build it for this, or I've been told that I can build it for $200,000. Well, until you see a contract that lays out all the details, the itemized estimates, and what it actually is comprised of, you can never be certain. It's always easy to hold on to that low number, hoping that that's going to be the number for you. But when you see all these listed out, that's when you're going to be able to understand and start asking questions. Watch out for vague permits, those kind of are those vague quotes, right, that are on napkins, or the cost per square foot. It's very hard to determine without a set of plans. Next slide, please. So as you're looking at a bid, you'll see line items, and the bid should include these. It should talk about the stages of construction, when the framing is going to happen, when they're going to pour the footings, the framing, they're going to start moving through to the roofing, when they're going to start installing the electrical systems, the plumbing, and you'll see this breakdown, and it should be separated, the costs for each of those stages. And then once again, you can look closely at there to see all the items that are included, and feel free and be empowered to ask questions. What does this mean? And the contractor should know and take time to be able to help you walk through that scope of work and those line by line items. Again, they're not all presented in this type of format. So you may have to do some comparison on your own, some cut and paste, to make sure you're aligning those things and understanding when you're comparing side by side or multiple quotes for a project. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Katherine to talk about contract review. So Katherine, you ready to do that?
I am right here, ready to roll.
Fantastic, thank
And
you.
again, Timothy, you did an amazing job, as well as Jonathan, kicking it off and teeing it off with some of the key components. And just to reiterate, so you've got your design team or your dream team who's putting your project together, which we've addressed earlier in the presentation. And now we've covered some components with regards to the contract. I must stress the fact that it's important that anyone who's starting an ADU project really takes the time, and I stress that, the time to ensure that everything that you are expecting for that project to look like, feel like, envision is really spelled out in the project. So for the participants today, I suggest that if you're educating your clients and or you are potentially looking to build your own ADU, you really take a step back and look at what is it I'm envisioning this ADU is going to do for our household or our property. And you think to yourself, am I going to be housing a loved one? Am I going to be housing an adult child? What am I doing with this project? Obviously, you want to potentially increase the rental income or monetarily, but what all are you trying to do? That's key. Then from there, you honestly need to think, what do I want the look and feel of it to look like? And when I have you do these steps, you are really going to make sure that you've got everything in it, okay? Because most folks say, well, I don't know construction, I'm new to this in many facets. And that's okay. But you want to make sure you go through this exercise of, do I want a particular roof? Do I want a gable roof? What type of roof do you want? What type of look do you want? Do you want a Spanish motif? Do you want a particular hardwood flooring? You need to do all this research now, prior to a contract being put together, so that when you do have those particularly approved designs and plans and things of that nature, you are reiterating it with the contractor that you are going to be potentially working with. And you want to make sure that that information is in your contract. You want to avoid what is known as change orders. Change orders can be very costly for projects, and they're last minute changes that could create tremendous changes to your budget. So if you do this researching now, when you are putting that contract together, you can look and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Contractor, I noticed that the fixtures are missing, or I noticed that I told you that I'd like the Kohler toilet option, or a certain type of sink, or a certain type of marble countertop or quartz countertop. You need to make sure that that is actually documented in there. Most folks will say, or most contractors will tell you, oh, we'll get to that later. No, later never comes. And in my extensive experience over this last 3.5, 4 years with ADUs that we've built through the entire state, that was always something that homeowners who did get hit with a change order always said, I wish I would have made sure that that was in my contract, and really had a detailed contract. So I must stress the fact that you want to make sure that everything that's going into that project and that unit is spelled out. You take the time and make sure that you spell out those particular details. In addition to that, make sure you understand the timeframes. You don't want a project that's going on for year after year after year. You want to make sure that there is firm commitments that when are we starting the project and when are we going to be hitting certain milestones in the project. Yes, every ADU is going to have certain hurdles and challenges and obstacles that come about, because every city and county is different, particularly throughout the state of California. But you want to make sure that that's spelled out. So, Mr. Contractor, you're asking me for X amount of money. When and what can I expect at that period? And you want to make sure that that is spelled out in your contract. So I know most folks say, oh, well, we'll put together something, and it doesn't really spell out the details. You need it to extensively spell out timeframes, anticipation, 3 months, 6-month period. What are we looking at to see that project completed? It will help with your construction anxiety level, and it will help to set the proper precedence with you and your contractor. A couple other pieces that I would also suggest, being that we have seen a lot, I would suggest that you potentially have an attorney look at the contract. If you are not prefaced in contracts and you're not aware, you might want to just have a real estate attorney, and or find potentially an attorney who is knowledgeable on contracts to review that, to make sure that all the legalese is in there when you are crafting your contract. I'll go to the next slide, please. Payment schedules. Over the course of the last 3.5 years, I have seen quite a bit when it comes to the ADU and the excitement for it by homeowners. And I must stress to you that you need to be cautiously careful. You need to ensure that something is spelled out in your contract to this effect, wherein you know how much down payment you need to provide when the contract is executed and started. You need to understand the payment schedules. And I will add in another piece that most folks forget. You need to make sure that there is what is known as a release of lien. You have a general contractor who is doing the work, and I would suggest you always do that, and or a licensed sub to do the work. Any contract where there is payment schedules that are to be released, as in draws or a first or second payment, I would always suggest that in addition to issuing the payment, you also get that release of lien. That guarantees you protection. Protection in that, let's say that the contractor doesn't pay those subs. Those subs can come back and they can in turn put a lien on the property. The release of lien protects you as a homeowner to say, okay, I'm issuing, let's say that we're issuing payment for underground sewer. That's the third payment on this example here on our screen. You get a signature from the subcontractor who does the plumbing if it is something that your contractor is sourcing out, to ensure that when you issue that $25,000 check to the contractor or to the sub, no one can come back and put a lien on the property. We have seen quite a bit of that activity, and you want to ensure that there are, in fact, release of liens. So you say to yourself, well, Catherine, there's 9 payments here. You want to make sure that anyone who is being subcontracted by that contractor, and it happens frequently, provides you a release of lien before you issue payment. And I cannot stress that enough. In addition, some folks think that they're supposed to pay the full amount for the project, and the contractor's off and running. That is not the case. You commence the project with $1,000 payment, and then from there, you need to have payment schedules so that as work is completed, payments are issued. You do not issue a full $200,000 and $4,000 check all at once. And I am cautioning people because some folks just don't know what they don't know. And it has happened more frequently than you could even imagine. In your payment schedule, you want to make sure it spells out site prep. What are we doing? What does that entail? Utility trenching. And you want there to be some level of explanation. So just because you're provided a contract by a contractor, don't just peruse through it quickly. Read through, digest the sections and what is happening with your property. Not to micromanage, but to understand the phases of the project and the importance of knowing those phases. Not that you're just getting ready to become a contractor, but you honestly want to know what's going on. I would also tie those payments to the inspections by the city and county. And so every project that is permitted is assigned a city or county inspector. You want to make sure that those payments are also tied to that. So not only do you have the protective measure of the release of lien, you also are making sure that you have the oversight and you're involved in those city inspections. And that is where, when those city inspections are completed, then in turn, you will then issue the payment after you've received your release of lien. So a couple things that people can think about as they're moving through this process and are educating others out in the field who are looking to build ADUs. I'll go to the next slide. I cannot stress cautiously careful. Our organization has the amazing opportunity over the last 3.5, 4 years to see a lot of ADU projects built throughout many counties throughout the state of California. It was a lot to take in. And it's definitely been an amazing experience. And there has been many challenges and many troubling aspects of what we're able to see. I would stress the fact, be cautiously careful and educate your homeowners that you're working with or individuals you're working with to be careful of individuals that are soliciting 12 months with no payment and will build your ADU from A to Z. That is where we're seeing a lot of activities that has a lot of concern and activities of predatory or fraudulent matters. So I would just be very cautious, not to say to go with a company that does the A to C work, because there are quite a few that do excellent work where they take the homeowner from, vision all the way through completion. And they find the contractors, they put the contracts together, and they charge potentially some oversight fees, etc. That's not the problem. It's just finding the proper organizations that are doing it and doing it right. There have been several instances where organizations have solicited and have not moved properly in the space. And so you want to be very careful. I always tell folks, if it smells like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And always use your spidey senses. If there's something that just doesn't seem right about it and it's just too good to be true, organizations like myself, Casita Coallition is here, as well as Contractors License Board. make the phone calls. So that when you do, or you are potentially presented with, this no 12-month payments, or possibly let's use solar financing to finance your ADU, or this creative financing, you want to be cautiously careful and do your due diligence before you sign on the dotted line, and definitely before you write any checks or make any payments to an institution like that. And again, I must reiterate, Casita Coalition is here, HPP Cares is here, and many of our members are also organizations that have been cleared to do the work that they do. Next slide. ADUs are an overall investment, and I will tell you, for many of the middle communities that we have managed to get the ADU grant out to, over this course of the last 3.5 years, 4 years, we have changed the trajectory of their financial overlook. We have created taking an underutilized space and being a location for people to be able to monetarily achieve many successes, wherein they bring in loved ones and they're creating that legacy, and or they're creating a source of income where they're able to maintain their housing. And I say ADUs is that investment. It's an investment that many people need to look into. Everyone needs to look into. Not only is it building the middle and creating affordable housing throughout the state of California, but it's a way for people to achieve so much more in that housing those loved ones, and then just creating that monetary source of income. But I must stress the fact you've got to select and do your homework on vetting the right professionals, and asking the questions. Don't be uncomfortable or, quick to just, here's my checkbook, contractor, do your due diligence and get the work done. You need to ask the uncomfortable questions. But before you ask the uncomfortable questions, you need to come prepared and do your homework. You need to know what it is you want. You need to go down to building and safety. Take a visit. Hi, I'm Mrs. Johnson. I live at 123 Main Street. I'm looking to build an ADU. How many ADUs can I build? This is something that is a free service to anyone who pays their property taxes. The county and building and safety business offices are there for you to ask these questions. So don't feel uncomfortable. If you have a unit that's not permitted, don't feel uncomfortable. Go and hear from the people who are going to give you the certificate of occupancy clearance, a group that's going to give you the permit. That is who you need to be talking to. A lot of people are like, oh, I paid a feasibility report service and it was $12,000, $20,000. When you're on a budget, you want to be cautiously careful with that. And so starting by touching base with the cities and counties who have approved plans and permits within those areas. A lot of folks don't even know that. You want to start there with your project to understand what the city and county is looking for, and then start to vet outwards, and maybe talk to a nonprofit. HPP Cares is one of them. NHSIE is an organization that's helping families build ADUs out in the Inland Empire. Then go to the nonprofits and see how they can help you and get you some guidance and direction. And then I just say, just be cautiously careful. Start with your vision. Visit the building and safety offices to see if they have any free plans and permits or things that you could license to help you with your design piece. Don't feel uncomfortable if that unit's not permitted. Get there so that you can start to monetize and receive the benefits of having that underutilized space be considered in your value and your wealth component. Next slide. HPP Cares has an amazing guidebook that we offer, where in turn, this guidebook provides you all of the information that you need from start to completion, taking you from the vision piece, advising you how you can go to building and safety and talk to them with regards to potential free or low cost plans. Then in turn, figuring out how to vet your contractor, figuring out your budget. This guidebook will take you from A to Z through that process. And then obviously you have my phone number as well as my email address. to get in contact with me. Most folks think I'm super, super busy, and I am, but if you shoot over an email with a quick question, I will more than likely be able to get back to you and guide you to the appropriate free resource that can assist you and help you take it to the next level. Next slide. I'll turn it back over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Katherine. This is excellent. There's a lot of moving parts that are key to developing an ADU. So what we have here is the beginning of our presentation. We're going to get into the Q&A section. I've seen a lot of great questions coming through. I see Celeste from our team has been answering them. We want to give everyone here the opportunity to ask even more. So start thinking it through. Drop those questions in the Q&A function. And what I'll do in the meantime, as our audience starts to think it through, I'll pose the first question to our panel. What we're going to do is we'll go Timothy first and then Katherine. The first question for our panel is, how important is it for an ADU professional to have localized experience with ADUs, especially given that there might be some city and county variation in terms of regulations?
Oh, absolutely. That's a real great question. It's very, very important. There are practitioners that work in multiple municipalities, so it may be someone that is located in a certain area, but also has experience and specialty in a different municipality. So it's important to identify, have you done projects in this area? Do you have examples of projects that have been built? And getting that information will really help you. If they're new to the municipality, you may want to look at the success they've had in maybe another one or one of their primary areas of work, so that you can see that they're capable of moving through that process with a municipality. So being new doesn't necessarily disqualify, but having experience certainly will elevate your confidence. Thank you. Katherine?
Great point, Timothy. Excellent response. And I will chime into this. Every municipality, city, county, community, everywhere is different. Okay. And it's just because I can see it from the lens that we see it at. We're at 52 counties throughout the entire state. So I will stress to you, let's just take an example. Monterey Park requires that you do a notary with regards to the unit that you're putting in so that you can be issued your address. Whereas Colton issues your address prior to the requirement of the notarized document that you're putting an ADU in. Just that in itself changes the timeline on your project, because if your professional is not aware of that, that can delay your project. There's also agency fees that are required. Some cities require LAUSD fees, some require Pasadena school fees to be paid. Agency pieces that are associated with your permitted project have to be attuned to and can also create delays and timeline issues. And if you're a professional who you've selected has no clue and is not aware of it, that will create an issue. That will create delays, unnecessary delays. That will create costs that you were not even made aware of. And so it's important to try to find someone within the area where your project or your property is located. How does one do that? Walk the neighborhood, treat the neighborhood. ADUs are going up everywhere. It's so funny. We're always on the freeway and my kids are like, oh my God, here she goes. That's one of our ADUs. That's one of our ADUs. But that's another ADU. When you're driving the streets, stop and seeing where the construction's being done or completed. People's door. Hey, I was driving by, I just saw your ADU is completed, or I see it's in process. Are you pleased with the contractor? Do you know if they've done any other projects in the area? That is how you're going to do your research. You can't actually get someone from building and safety to give you a direct person because they're not going to provide you a list. But the best way is to work the neighborhoods and to see who in your neighborhood's doing the work.
Excellent. Thank you, Timothy and Katherine. I do see some questions coming in, so we're going to go to our first audience question. Can you speak to the topic of utilities and how important it is to have a separation of service, like metering, between the primary home and the ADU?
I will say that it all depends city and county, because some of them are okay if you don't, and some are okay if you do. I'll go to Monterey Park because that's our latest project where we had a lot happening at that project. Monterey Park allows you to do either or. But the interesting thing is when they find out you're doing an ADU, they change the pressure in your water. So you have an option to either keep it at the level where you're not splitting off the bills and it's $4,000, or you can split it off and it's going to be another $7,000. So I say this to say you've got to go to the city, educate yourself on what the city requirements are going to be. And that's free information. Again, you don't need to pay anybody to do that. You do the research. Separation of utilities, it just creates a more seamless process. You rent the unit out, someone keeps the lights on, now you've got a $1 million bill. It's all kind of your preference, but you also have to see what the cities are requiring, and they are putting a little bit more parameters in on it. That's all I have to say, Timothy.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to that is I really want you to think about the future, the legacy of the ADU. This is an investment. If you think about the age of the home that may exist, it may be from the 20s, the 40s. There are decades that this ADU is going to last, and it may take on different shapes and forms. We also have other legislation that may open doors to opportunities that you haven't planned on. So having separate utilities, when you start thinking about AB 1033, which allows for selling an ADU as a condo, you may want to have that opportunity or exist as you move forward. So thinking beyond its current use, thinking the uses it may become over time is an important factor also in that first part. Because if you have a crew on site and you can do the work and it's built into the budget, it may be easier than bringing them in and then retrofitting this infrastructure later. Something to think about.
One other thing that I do want to chime in, and you just triggered a thought, Timothy, is most folks who are doing garage ADU conversions and they're attached, we have been noticing have been required to do an upgrade on their panel. So when you are negotiating or you're having that conversation with your contractor thinking, oh, I'm just going to do a garage conversion, that's the least pain in getting an ADU done. People are finding that they tend to be the same cost or a little bit more costly. So just keep that in mind with your panels. You want to do your due diligence on that, talk with an electrician, and make sure you understand those pieces.
And Catherine, as you said, this is an investment. So this is not something that's going to depreciate over time as if you bought a new car or something. It is going to be something that you've invested in. So often adding a little more to helping the long-term goals. We know things aren't getting less expensive. So maybe adding an electric meter now is going to be, it sounds like a lot, but compared to maybe converting it 10 years from now, it could be a real great money savings. So it's really thinking about the planning of that. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two follow-ups. So number one from Florentine in the chat, it is most common for people to separate out electrical and gas. Water is typically cost prohibitive compared to the size of the average water bill. So thank you, Florentine, for adding that context. Also, we referenced AB 1033 in the question and in the response. AB 1033 is an assembly bill that Casita was a part of that has passed, and it allows local jurisdictions, cities and counties to opt in to allow the separate sale, the separate conveyance of the ADU and the primary home as a condo. So that's something that is not a mandate across the state. Your local jurisdiction has to opt into it. If you want to see ADUs as condos in your local jurisdiction, if you live in a city or an unincorporated area, go to your city council, your board of supervisors, and start talking to them about it. Let them know the importance of having a new avenue for homeownership with the opt-in aspect of AB 1033. It will require a zoning ordinance. We have resources on that. We have a guidebook that has a model ordinance and more. So yeah, talk to your local jurisdiction if that's something that you are interested in.
And
Another
Jonathan,
question. Oh yeah, go ahead, Timothy.
Before you jump on, hey, the Casita Academy, let's talk about how you can get educated about AB 1033, the other legislation, the new legislation out, understanding how they are nuanced and overlap. So at the Academy, we hold workshops monthly. We have long-term courses that extend 3 weeks where you can really dive deep into that, those topics and conversations specific to your property. It's nice to know generally, But as you start to narrow it down, it really does become about the project you're working on and the information specific to that, the property, the characteristics of that site. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Timothy. And we do have our Academy ADU Basics workshop coming up, I believe, this week. So if anyone's interested in that, reach out to any of us and we can get you signed up. We had a question earlier, actually, I think this one related to Catherine's presentation. The question was, do you get a release of lien from the subcontractor or the contractor? And is it before or after the payment being made?
Before the payment is made. Every contractor needs to be paid every Friday. Let's just call it what it is. Okay. So get ahead of the game. Okay. And I say that and I laugh and I giggle and my antennas go up. So key here, contractors want to be paid every Friday. You need, before you sign that contract, who is your crew? Who are your subs? I need to see their licenses. I need to see their insurances. And so you'll pair them up. So to answer that question, before you hand that check over, you need to make sure, do you have my release of lien and my receipt for both yourself and the subcontractor, so no one can come back and put a lien on your property? Great question, but that is how I would handle it.
Thank you. And folks, keep those questions coming in. I see them coming now. Let's go to this question from Cooper. Would legalizing an ADU cause an increase in property taxes if converted from finished square footage? I know there's resources now, and there's the ability to legalize ADUs through Assembly Bill 2533, among other ways. So would legalizing an ADU cause an increase in property taxes if converted from finished square footage?
I always defer anyone who is doing the conversion is to touch base with the tax assessor's office, and then also to touch base with building and safety. I am not in a position to tell you if the property will be assessed or it will be a blended tax assessment. So I always defer back to the tax assessor's office. You're not going to be penalized. I have not heard anyone who's gone to the tax assessor office being told, oh, you've got an unpermitted unit and now you're going to get this big penalty. So I definitely want to take that fear away and just make the phone call, let them know what you're doing with the project, be on the up and up. And go from there. And kind of when you throw in HPP Cares told me to call, they all know me at both building and safeties, majority of the building safeties and property tax assessor's office. So you can just say, hey, I was directed by HPP Cares to contact you. And I can almost certainly tell you they will not penalize you and they will give you the proper assessment on what you can expect.
Yeah, I want to add to that, now that ADUs, the law has been in place for several years. It was an issue originally with the assessor's office not having the calculation, not understanding how it may, the property taxes may be affected. So calling them, I just want to emphasize what Catherine's saying is that the reports I get is when I contact the assessor's office, I can just say, hey, I want to add an ADU. I'm not sure the size. What is the process for me to understand what the impact will be on my property taxes? And they more than likely have a sheet or can explain that or send you to the information on their website to help you understand that. So reach out to them. You can just present it hypothetically, but they should have some worksheets for you to work through and understand based on the property taxes that you're paying now.
Thank you. We're going to go to our next question that's come in. Can you give examples of any red flags that suggest an ADU professional isn't the right person to take on an ADU project?
They talk in squares. I always tell consumers, don't allow your contractor to talk in squares. And when I say that, oh, it's going to be $300 a square to build your ADU. Prices, I would probably be cautiously careful on pricing. If someone is telling you they can do a new build, 3-bedroom, 3-bath ADU, 1,200 square feet in your backyard, and it's only going to cost $100,000. Yeah, you may only have that budget, but I would be just cautiously careful. And then I must stress the fact, because this has been something that we have been seeing quite a bit. is where, oh, don't worry about financing. We can give you solar panels with your ADU, and you're going to take on multiple solar panel personal loans. So be cautiously careful of that. And you don't have to make a payment for 12 months. And it's a good selling point because most folks, are trying to budget to build the ADU, and don't want to necessarily start making a payment on it, for what their reasons are with their budgeting. So I would just be careful if you hear that type of selling point, where you're being told you're going to take on a solar loan. There is no personal loan financing available associated with solar financing. And I must stress that. And we're seeing a recurring theme of that presenting itself quite a bit.
Yeah, the other items I'd like to add to that is, based on the topics that we covered in this webinar, think about the contract examples we've looked at. A lot of times the conversation with a designer or a contractor comes with a general bid. Hey, it could be between these two numbers. If it's a number that is within your range, ask for a formal contract and bid, and then you will get things in writing. The old written on a napkin or just I heard it will cost you about this much may not include all the components that are needed to build that. A lot of times it may just involve the materials involved to build the product, but not the permit fees or not the water and sewer upgrades. So there are a lot of components that you want to think about. There's much more to it, but asking for a formal contract. If there's someone you're interested in, just say, hey, I like what you're talking. Sounds like it's in my price range. Send me a contract. And you'll begin to be able to have that review process. Jonathan?
The other piece, Timothy, and that's a great point, you triggered a thought for me, is make sure the contract is with the licensed professional. There are a lot of contractors that aren't quote unquote licensed and they're using someone else's license. So when you see that contract, make sure that it is matching and you do visit the Contractors License Board website. You simply type in the numbers and it should present the exact name. And I must stress that because we've had a few shenanigans with them changing the name a little bit. The contract should reflect the exact name associated with that license. So if the name of the company is Bob Builders, that is what should be reflective on the Contractors License Board. In addition to that, you also want to make a phone call to the bond companies and the insurance companies. And I would also just do an extra measure by calling the investigative line for Contractors License Board. You can look at their contact information and you can either talk to Northern California or Southern California's team, physically get someone on the line and say, hey, I'm looking to work with Bob the Builder. His license number is 1279. Yes, I see it on the website, but you need to ask these two questions. Is there an administrative investigation? And is there a regulatory investigation? And they need to be able to answer those questions and they will provide you that information. That's the additional due diligence. I would also make those phone calls prior to issuing the draw payments. And you say to yourself, wait a minute, Catherine, hold on. So now I'm going to call to make sure they still have their license after I've already checked initially. Yes, you want to make sure that you're cautiously careful with that. In that, you're saying that the person was licensed initially, and then possibly they could have lost their license through this process. Yes. So even when you're issuing those draw payments, you want to also double check that they are in fact licensed. And calling the investigative units in Norwalk for Southern California, and then there's the Sacramento office you can call. It's a direct phone number, and someone will answer those lines, and they will in turn verify that those persons or that entity is still licensed at the time that you're issuing that draw payment. I have seen a lot, everyone, and I just want you to be cautiously careful as you issue payments to the contractors.
Thank you. We also have some additional comments from Florentine in the chat about engaging the contractor. So thank you, Florentine, for having that come in. Another, on this topic, another kind of layer to this is, what role do references, portfolios, and any kind of past projects, especially local projects, play in evaluating your ADU professional?
Tim, I'll let you take the lead on this one, and I'll come in right behind you.
I know I almost started right in behind you because it just was hitting my head so hard about referrals and understanding prior work, and we touched on it a little bit, but definitely you want to ask not only for references or other projects that have been built in your community, in your area, but ask for contact information. Reach out to those owners and have that conversation. Say, what was your experience? And you can show them the contract if they've been through it. Have you done this? Get that information. That always adds that layer. Again, I'm always referring to building your confidence to make the decisions, because the decisions are big and they're impactful in your life. So you want to be in the most confident place to make that. So having those references, they can be references from other areas, but the local or the more coordinated is to you locally is going to help you understand and visit, pass by, see what's happening. Katherine, go for it.
Visit more than the portfolio that they've completed. Visit active projects that they're in the middle of, where you've got homeowners that possibly have a front yard full of trash and soil, and it's been there for months. And not to say that that's always the case, but I would just say, great, I see this portfolio of what you've completed. You've got those happy customers, but can I talk to the folks that you're in the trenches with right now? You might not be able to go to the actual project and go inside because it is an active construction site. Homeowner is liable if anything happens to you, but you can set up potentially an engagement, a Zoom call, and be able to talk to those folks. Try to do as much due diligence as you possibly can. And I cannot stress that. And be that willy-nilly that is asking the questions. And wanting to see and know more in order to earn your confidence in this process.
Like we said, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people. Next question is, ADUs involve a lot of project coordination. So how should homeowners ensure that all the different ADU professionals that are involved, architects, the permit expediters, the contractors, how should they ensure that all of these different folks work well together?
That's an excellent question. And I will tell you, you really need to know who your ADU team is from the gate. So you've determined that you've got a plan and you've already got your architect, okay? And they're in the mix. You've got your permits that are approved. You need to make sure that there is some synergy with your contractor and that architect. So when you've already selected the architect from however way you found that person, okay? It's the key is seeing if that architect can work in tune with the contractor that you have selected. I have noticed with the licensed architects, not the draft professionals, they like to be more engaged in the build process. So I think it's going to be an interview process with you and the architect because you've selected them first. Then you line up your professional contractors who are going to do the build and have them, exchange and see who has the best synergy. I also will say that in your contract with the contractor you select, there needs to be definite spell outs of what is going to happen, who's going to do what, roles and responsibilities. I'm finding again with our licensed architects that they are really hands-on, and a lot of them, because you are paying such a hefty price point when you are working with a licensed architect, they in turn want to be engaged in the rebuild process, and they may want to stop by as another set of eyes in your project. Everything must be written and there needs to be a spell out of roles and responsibilities.
I agree.
Sorry, I took the words from you, Tim.
Sometimes everything it was said, it's just, I agree. Yes.
Fantastic. You can tell I'm so passionate about this topic.
Fantastic. I love it.
Well, just be mindful of the time. We're going to start winding it down and we'll be moving into more so final thoughts. And we're going to bring that slide back up as well about the Academy. We want to make sure that people have that as a resource to check out. But as we start to think about next steps for everyone who's on the call, people who are thinking about building an ADU and working with ADU professionals. If you could give, each of you, we'll start with Timothy, then we'll go to Katherine. If you could give one piece of advice to someone about doing hiring for their ADU project, one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would say take more time than you typically would think to make that selection. So take more time, don't feel rushed. I know you're excited, but taking more time will help balance the realism of what it's going to take to build the project and the excitement and the starry eyes of how exciting it is to start. But it will bring some balance to that and then help you make better decisions.
Yeah, I have to echo that. This is not a race, it's a marathon. And you need to be cautiously careful. Not to say everyone has ill intent, but you need to be cautiously careful. I would have my vision of what I want. I would make sure that's implemented in the contract. And I would vet and continually vet, even at every check that's issued, including my release of lien.
Thank you. We have a lot of resources on developing ADUs, so this webinar is one of many things that we can offer everyone on our call today. Let's bring that slide up for the Casita Academy as we start to close it out. The Academy is something that Timothy leads, and it is a resource for all. So it is a way to build on the learning here. And we'll get that on everyone's radar as a potential follow-up for going deeper into all that we've learned today. I'm going to start to close this out. We're getting close to the top of the hour. So first and foremost, a big thank you to Katherine and Timothy for joining us today as our panelists and sharing all their insights from their years and years of doing this work. Being on the ground and doing this work with the community members. They've learned a lot and they've shared it with us. Thank you also to all of our attendees. Apologies if we didn't get to the questions, but we do appreciate all the engagement. Also, I apologize if I have this interference with my mic. I'm not sure what that is today. We'll figure that out. I want to thank our major funders and our webinar sponsors, Arnold Ventures and Wells Fargo, as well as our premier members, for their support of all that we do at Casita Coalition. They help us bring these webinars for free and to all. So thank you very much. We invite ADU and middle housing professionals, community-based organizations, homeowners, advocates, anybody out there to add their voice to the conversation, to get involved and stay involved by becoming a member of Casita Coalition. Reach out to us at casitacoalition.org. Let's talk about the Academy. We have a Casita Academy, an online academy that teaches people about ADUs and middle housing and more. Through our Casita Academy, we offer afternoon workshops, so you can spend a Friday lunch hour with us, or you can do a 4-week course and go deeper and learn that much more about ADUs. Everything you need to know. It will be building on everything that we talked about today. We have a website as well with a lot of resources. We have all of our past webinars. We have guidebooks on middle housing and ADUs. So please do check this out. If you're interested in joining the Academy for either our one-day Friday workshop or our longer 4-week course, reach out to anybody from Casita Coalition. Again, go to our website to find out more, casitacoalition.org. And finally, make sure that you are on the lookout for our next webinar, October 22nd at 11 a.m. Pacific. This webinar is called Starter Homes, Stronger Communities. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon, and we'll see you next time.